Welcome to the Bright Side of Longevity. Join host Dr. Roger Landry along with co-host Danielle Pailly and guests as they discuss the bright side of getting older through healthy longevity. Guided by research, this lighthearted and educational show will leave you with practical ways to brighten your life's journey. Dr. Rob Winningham received his Ph.D. in neuroscience from Baylor University. He joined the faculty at Western Oregon University in 2000, where he serves as a professor of psychological sciences. He helped create the Gerontology Department when he was division chair of the Behavioral Sciences Division, and he served as college dean, provost, and vice president for academic affairs at Western Oregon University. His scholarship and publications have generally focused on maximizing quality of life, cognitive stimulation, intergenerational programs, and social engagement throughout the lifespan. In addition to publishing many peer-reviewed scientific articles, Dr. Winningham has been invited to give nearly 2,000 presentations at various conferences, workshops, and community settings. He's also helped develop a number of popular products for senior living and healthcare, including Linked Senior, SmartFit, and Activity Connection. He has 2 published books, Train Your Brain, How to Maximize Memory Ability in Older Adulthood, and his latest book, Cranium Crunches, both of which can be found on Amazon.
Well, welcome everybody to the Bright Side of Longevity. I am here with my colleague, my role model, my inspirer, Danielle.
How Feelings are today, mutual. Danielle? Hi, Dr. Roger. How are you doing?
Just great. All is well. Got through the holidays unscathed, and we're out and about in the new year. Well, I'm pretty excited today because I love having not only scholars and interesting people, but friends. I love having them on this podcast. And today, sometimes academics have a reputation of, maybe being a little. I'll try to be kind, maybe a little academic in the word. And but our guest today is I have found him to be not only a good friend, but energetic and passionate and so on track with what needs to be dealt with and talked about and inspire to inspire people to live a lifestyle we know everything we're about. And Dr. Rob, you know Dr. Rob Danielle, and he's worked with us a long time. And Dr. Rob, it is so fine to see you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with both of you today. Thank you.
Well, we know you're a busy guy. I mean, you're a lecturer. You were a provost and in the C-suite, so to speak, of Western Oregon University. Everybody has just heard your resume, so they know you're a busy guy with quite a history. So we appreciate it. So with that wealth of somewhat diverse, in a very positive way, background that you have, could you tell our listeners a little bit about your current work relative to healthy longevity?
Yeah, well, I had the good fortune of teaching in both a psychology department and a gerontology department. Actually, we had to call it gerontology, the study of older adulthood, because sometimes 18-year-olds don't know what gerontology means.
Oh,
but it's a wonderful opportunity, and you get time every day if you schedule your life correctly as a professor to do some research. So all of your lectures are up to speed. You have time to do scholarship, and that's my scholarship on, I guess I would say, just trying to find ways to improve older adults' quality of life.
Excellent. we talk about the intergenerational experience you do so often, and you're such a passionate spokesman for it. But you live it, and that has to be inspiring for you to mix with young minds. Even though I think our generation gaps seem to be getting wider and wider, and maybe there's misunderstanding. But this is a great opportunity, not only for you personally, but for them to connect with other generations.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing that up, and I think it's really appropriate, given that we're on the Bright Side of Longevity podcast here. I think the listeners I was surprised. I think they might be surprised what I'm seeing now in the young people. I'm actually teaching 2 introductory psychology classes at the moment, and the students are craving in-person experiences. It used to be if we offered an online class, it would fill up first, and then students would take the in-person classes. Particularly for the first and second year college students, that has flipped, and they are craving that. A class that I taught last term, we even were talking about, it was cognitive psychology. We were talking about wisdom in the context of, what abilities do we retain in older adulthood, which ones begin to diminish. And I kind of threw the idea out that I thought that they would kind of, buy into that, ask the question, is the increasing, cultural gap between the younger and older people, does that make, the opportunities to share wisdom less? And I was really surprised. The students were unanimous. They said, we need to know what you all know. And in particular, and I can't believe they said it. It was a real kind of a moment of honesty. They said in that class, and it was at the end of the term, so we had a relationship, but they said, we need to know how to behave in society. And I was just so surprised and warmed to hear that idea. And I think that that's kind of consistent with the idea that, like I said, the first and second year students, they almost unanimously, if their lives will allow it, they want the in-person connection. And I think that's kind of fitting to some of the topics we might discuss today about just loneliness and social isolation.
Oh, bravo. You just made my day. We're looking at each other on Zoom, and I see, the big smile on Danielle's face. No, honestly, that really is one of the most optimistic things I have heard in quite a while.
We call these the students might be considered part of the pandemic generation, and we were always wondering how they were going to turn out. So I think this is an interesting glimpse into that trajectory.
So you've been doing this work now in brain health for almost 3 decades. Are there some main takeaways after all the research that you've conducted?
Oh yeah, that's a great question, Danielle. I would probably begin with the area where there's the most research. I'm actually writing a review paper on the effects of physical exercise on cognitive health. And I haven't gone through and counted them, but I know there are more than 1,000 randomized controlled studies that have looked at the effects of physical exercise on brain health, in particular, our ability to make new memories and live independently. And so that's probably the biggest area. And the take-home message on that, to kind of summarize the past 20 years of research, is that both aerobic training and strength training are needed. I think a lot of us were surprised to find out that strength training or resistance training leads to a significant improvement in cognition that's independent of any benefit you can get from aerobic training. Oh. So I think that is a big one. I would also add to the list cognitive exercise. I've done a lot of research in that area, and I know there's still some suspicion about cognitive exercise, but to be honest, I don't know why it's there, because in the literature, they're doing meta-analyses now where they're pulling together randomized controlled studies, and the effects are clear that cognitive exercise, if done right, can help older adults improve memory. Maybe some of that skepticism comes from the fact that younger and middle-aged adults, we don't see as big of a benefit from the cognitive exercise, but definitely for the older adults. I'd also add to the list of social engagement. That's the intergenerational opportunities. Related to that, having a purpose. And I think that wasn't something that I could probably even find in the literature 25 years ago, particularly in the context of brain health, but that also is important. And then just rattle off some other ideas. Good sleep quality and quantity. We also want to avoid diabetes. I think that's another big finding, that diabetes will wreak havoc on cognition, memory, avoid depression, anxiety. And finally, the one that I think is getting probably has the steepest trajectory of new studies coming out are the effects of uncorrected hearing deficits on cognition. So if anybody is listening to this podcast really loud because their hearing is not as good as they'd like, they might want to see an audiologist, because that does put them at increased risk for dementia.
I'm curious if that risk is because people isolate when they can't hear. Is that the main?
Yeah, so people have written about that, and there's two main hypotheses. I kind of believe that, that what you just described is probably the most salient, that they isolate, but they also, even if they're not isolating, they just miss out on the conversation, right? And they even might not even be able to connect and make new acquaintances and friends if you're not hearing all of what somebody else is saying, but certainly they also can withdraw. There is another hypothesis that might explain some of the effect that we need to keep an open mind about. It could be that there are just kind of some global central nervous system deficits. Could even be some neurological things going on that not only affect hearing, but also affect cognition. But I think that social hypothesis is probably the strongest.
Well, I'm going through this right now. As you know, I was in the military for 23 years in the Air Force. I was exposed to a lot of loud noise, explosions, whatever. And so my wife reminds me that I don't always hear things. And I did. I bit the bullet, and I went and got some hearing aids and carried them around with me without wearing them for a year. This is a stigma, I'm sure, still in our society. It's becoming less so, and in the technology is so good, it's not even visible. But I do find it. I find that when I say I forget them and I'm guessing what people are saying, and my wife reminds me later on that night, that was not along the lines of the topic, what you said here and here. So I can absolutely identify with this, and I could fast forward here and see more and more isolation if I don't wear them. So I plan to wear them. Now, so we've learned a lot of things. We've updated a lot of things, but there had to be some things that, maybe were sounded positive a while ago, but maybe not so now.
Yeah, I think that always happens. Science is a self-correcting discipline. And I think that can be frustrating for people because you get an idea in your head and you think that that is a fact that's true, but we constantly learn. And I think that a lot of the challenges that we see in studying brain health is because sometimes we're looking at correlational studies. And just because two things are correlated, it doesn't mean one caused the other. And we have to do correlational studies because, well, in the context of hearing deficits, we aren't randomly going to assign 500 people to have hearing deficits and randomly assign 500 people to have good hearing and then see what happened to them. There's just some things we wouldn't ethically ever do. So I would kind of point to two things that I've had to change my presentations about, and I feel guilty about this. I always try to, and then it's taught me to be very scientifically honest with people and to point out correlational studies. But one that is probably the most impactful and probably the greatest number of people have heard about is the effects of alcohol on brain health. For the past 20 years, I've been telling people about results from a really large longitudinal study where they followed people for a long time, thousands of people. It's called the Rotterdam study. And in that study, they found that people that drink a lot, they're much more likely to get dementia. But the people that are moderate drinkers, depending on male, female size of your body, 1 to 2 drinks a day, they were less likely to develop dementia than the people who never drank. And I think that fit with a lot of people's kind of schemas about alcohol and the idea of, they talk about the Italian paradox. How could it be that Italians eat what they do and drink so much wine and they have such good heart and brain health? They thought that, red wine was good. So I think that kind of fit people's schemas. But they've done an reanalysis of that longitudinal studies and 1 or 2 others, and they found, I can't believe it took us this long to find it, Some people that were chronic alcoholics that quit drinking, they were put into the no drinking group. And as you probably know, Dr. Roger, that alcohol can actually lead to a type of dementia, Korsakoff syndrome.
Yes.
Um, and so that chronic alcoholism that led them to completely abstain, put them in the no drinking group, that might have been driving the increased risk of cognitive problems in the no drinking group because they had some of that effect. So we'll wait to get more evidence. We're always probably gonna have to rely on correlational studies there. But I'm not going to be telling people anymore that moderate alcohol consumption may be good for your brain.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's tough because of the confounding that can go along with all the social connection associated with drinking, which is a positive thing, so that's difficult.
Yeah, and you're right. And that actually could also be driving some of the effects. If it is true that people that, drink 1 to 2 glasses of wine a few days a week while they're socializing, they might be getting the benefit from that socializing. That's what's helping their brain health and had nothing to do with the wine.
Well,
As
I
a
think
wine lover, I find this very disappointing.
Well, I will say, I think, if you've been to Oregon, we grow a lot of Pinot Noir grapes, so the red wine. They are one of the highest in a powerful antioxidant called resveratrol. So you still can get your antioxidants from that occasional glass of wine. So there's a lot of, give and take here.
Well, during COVID, I think we saw a remarkable increase in drinking, and I think we're seeing the effects of that, the cultural, the individual, the behavioral effects of that. We probably will see it for some time, but I think especially like you hear dry January, right? Where people are making the New Year's resolution, usually not a good thing because it doesn't last long. But at least we're seeing a recognition that maybe we went too far during COVID. Some of us.
Dr. Roger, I am encouraged, though, many of my friends and us included, so John and I switched more to a plant-based diet. We were getting out to exercise. We wanted to do everything we could to build our immune system. Many of our friends were actually eating healthier and exercising more because we didn't have a vaccine. We didn't know what was going to happen. So I think you could be on one side of the coin or the other. You just are depressed and are sitting home drinking and eating whatever, or you're like, hey, I want to do whatever I can to prevent getting sick.
Absolutely. As always, Danielle, you are correct.
And I would add just one other thing that I've changed. It probably isn't as followed as widely as the alcohol consumption effects. It's vitamin D. So we all need vitamin D. We get vitamin D largely from the sun. It's in some of our food products. But 10 to 15 years ago, there were correlational studies that indicated that higher levels of vitamin D had some positive effects on brain health and a whole host of other things that I'm not going to talk about. That's not my area of expertise, but a lot of other medical outcomes. And that has also been pulled back. I think some of the challenge there was we did not know, there was no standard for what the correct level of vitamin D should be in our bodies, the correct level that we could consume. But they've done some additional studies on that. And so I've kind of pulled those slides out as a possible supplement that could help with brain health. It still might, but the effects are not nearly as large as we thought they were a decade ago.
I have a gastroenterology friend, and and he assures me it's related to vitamin D proper levels, a lower risk for colon cancer. But as you said, there are many other effects, and we'll see. But we're learning. It's self-correcting. I love that term. So, I think we should live lives that are self-correcting.
That's good.
Dr. Roger Landry is a preventive medicine physician trained at Tufts University School of Medicine and Harvard University School of Public Health. For nearly 2 decades, his focus has been on empowering older adults to experience a healthy longevity. He is the award-winning author of the book Live Long, Die Short, A Guide to Authentic Health and Successful Aging. Dr. Landry is an inspiring storyteller and presenter. His keynote addresses are powerful, entertaining, and optimistic. Learn more at livelongdieshort.com. Now, you had mentioned earlier that social engagement and avoiding loneliness can be good for your brain health. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and this is a topic that I think is getting a lot of interest lately. I think in part, kind of post-pandemic, what happened to our social structures and our social lives. There was a 2023 advisory from the U.S. Surgeon General that stated we're having a loneliness epidemic in the United States, and I would probably say a lot of other first world countries. And even before the pandemic, nearly 1 in 2 Americans reported feeling lonely. And those numbers appear to be going up. If somebody wanted to do a deep dive, the U.S. Surgeon's advisory report on loneliness is available on the internet and quite accessible. Some great graphs, great research. But one of the things that kind of hit the headlines, you might even have heard about this in the news when this came out in May of 2023. They shared results of a study. And what this study did was it said, okay, we're going to look at people for the next 6 or 7 years, and we're going to try to see what factors predict if they die in the next 6 to 7 years. And these studies largely look at older adults, middle-aged and older adults. And what they found was the biggest factor that predicted mortality was actually loneliness. And that was higher than smoking 15 or more cigarettes, or smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. And then there were other things after that, such as obesity, physical activity. Loneliness was the best predictor of mortality. So that were the headlines, loneliness is more dangerous than smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. And if we kind of poke at that a little more and say, why? And there's a lot of research on this, and there's many health outcomes. You're 30% more likely to have heart disease. You're 32% more likely to have a stroke. You have poorer physical outcomes if you do have a serious health event, weaker immune system, and you're up to 50% more likely to develop dementia if you're lonely. And this might be another area that has changed. Back in 2007, I did a study to try to improve perceptions of social support and decrease loneliness in assisted living communities, and kind of did a deep dive into that research. And when we wrote that paper, the take-home message for me was that it didn't matter if you had friends. You just needed to think you had friends. Because it was all about perception. And that's what people would take these tests, and if they thought they had friends, they had the positive benefits. If they didn't think they had friends, they had negative benefits, regardless of their social environment. Well, that is probably still true, but we've learned in the past 15, 20 years is that instrumental social support, that is, what will other people do for you? Will they drive you to the doctor? Will they pick your medication up? This morning, my dad is almost 80, now lives in our community, and we're having a snow and ice event coming up. So we're getting my dad, some food in case the power goes out. I asked my dad, do you have a remote charger for your phone? He said, what is that? And so we're delivering him a remote charger this morning. Those sorts of things, and having somebody that can do those sorts of things, that actually seems surprisingly predictive of the consequences of a serious health event, which makes sense, right? You have somebody there to take care of you. So both perceptions, but also is somebody there to give you a hand, seem to be driving these health outcomes.
I think this. I'm sure that this is such an identified risk for negative health outcomes that England has established a ministry of loneliness in the government. And I believe Australia, Canada's considering it, I believe, and Ireland, because they have socialized medicine. The government is well aware of the cost of the healthcare for their population, and they saw this as important enough to intervene, which is significant.
Well, and I think that's a good point. There might even be some public policy interventions that could save a lot of suffering, but could also save the cost of healthcare, keep people out of the emergency room, for example. So I think all of that's really important.
You know, you answered a long-standing debate with me and my husband, John. So we're both introverts, but he's super like, I don't need to talk to, like, you need more interaction than I do. I'm fine. And I always said, well, you need to have the social interaction. But you kind of answered the question, like, so it's if you feel you have enough and if you can get the support you need. Because when either of us have a problem, we have any number of people that we can call on. Dr. Gobble used to say, at 3 o'clock in the morning, who can you call? So I need to stop beating him up for not being more
Yeah.
social.
Well, you've heard this, Danielle. You can be alone, but
Yeah.
not necessarily lonely.
Yeah.
Some people, need alone time. We all need some alone time. Some people more than others. And I think that has a lot to do with what you said. The perception of having friends is important. I'm alone in this world and no one is ever going to come to my aid if I need it, that sort of things.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And the opposite can also happen. You can actually be surrounded by people, but really experience high levels of loneliness. The one thing about that Surgeon General's report, which I don't think most people probably even got to the end, it's like a 100-page report, but the last quarter of that report is what can we do? And it's actually broken down by different industries and sectors and different parts of our society. And I thought that was really exciting because it's one thing to describe the problem, but we all could play a role in reducing loneliness in our society.
Okay, Dr. Rob, we're going to make you the minister of loneliness for the country. So, what are you going to do? I'm sure you have some ideas.
Well, I'd have to give that some thought, but I think kind of kind of extending the trajectory that I think a lot of people are on post-pandemic. Just like we have some people that, after the pandemic or during the pandemic, they doubled down on fitness, others did not maybe. But if we can take those people that doubled down on reaching out to their friends, reaching out to their loved ones, I'm seeing this more in my life. And I don't know if it's somewhat confounded by the fact, the friends who are close to my age, their kids are, kind of beginning to leave the home. So we now have more time to socialize with each other again. But, my close friends are, and I notice, and I'm doing this too, so I'm reciprocating, but they're making a better effort, particularly my friends that I don't live close to, that, every, couple of months, it's just, they're sending, hey, just checking in on you, or, hey, I took this picture and I thought of you. And I think that we all can do that. I also think that I would give the tools to healthcare professionals. And I think we're going to see more people screening for loneliness, just like we have screened for depression and anxiety, among our primary care providers. So I think that is happening as well. I think we can have an intervention in the schools, give the teachers the curriculum, give the families the tools to try to teach good. Actually, this new phrase, this is the phrase of the quarter I'm hearing a lot in the past few months, good social fitness. And give them the tools and tell them the benefits of doing that, kind of normalize this a little bit more. I would also work to strengthen our local communities and civic organizations. I recently gave a keynote address for a large fundraiser for the YMCA, and the whole event was around social connectedness. And you think of the YMCA, okay, they're going to be doing some sports things, some fitness things, maybe they have a gym, but a lot of our larger YMCAs, they're the hub of the social community, and there's more that we can do if we support and invest in those types of organizations.
You know the blue zone research, and we see people in blue zones living to a ripe old age, very healthy. And one of the characteristics is exactly that. Not from the older adult standpoint, they're considered cultural treasures. They're very much integrated into the society, and young people and the intergenerational experience. It's very strong, and I have to feel that's a factor.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that, we've spent a lot of time, kind of thinking about what are some of the best ways to support people living in senior living communities. And I hope that they continue to embrace intergenerational communities. There could be some reason people want to live in 55 plus only communities. But from my standpoint, that doesn't seem natural. That doesn't fit how humans have lived. It doesn't give we lose some opportunities for meaning and purposeful activities. I hope we do more of that. We all need support, and I know some of us who are older or looking at retirement, we have time to give back to the community, and I think that segregation hasn't helped us.
No, we have colleges and universities who've invested and or at least encouraged the development of senior living right next, contiguous with, sometimes even on the property of the university. And I think that I know those have been very successful. Maybe there's one coming to Western Oregon.
Yeah, and we actually, one of the things that we do with our gerontology and some of our psychology students is we set up large dinners at the Salem, Oregon Senior Center called Center 50 Plus, and we will have 10 or 12 people at a table, and they share. And we got some college students, we have some older adults, and they're sharing. And the level at which that they're getting meaningful interaction, that they tell us they love the experience, they want to come back to do more of that, I think surprised all of us. So more of those opportunities we can create, the better.
As I get older, I feel the hunger, and I have grandkids and that sort of thing. But just the way things roll in our society, if you don't pay attention, you can easily get isolated from other generations. So.
I tell you what, I work as a care coach for a number of different organizations now, and the scariest thing when I'm on a call with somebody in coaching is when I ask them, who do you have for social support with whatever they're dealing with? And they say, well, you're it. I find that scary. And so we have conversations around how can you interact with, meet some new people, who can you reach out to? So it made me think when you were talking about some of these interventions, greater public awareness and some of those proactive screenings, do you feel the stigma around mental health and social interaction are changing? And what I mean by that is asking for support. So grew up in the 80s where everything was like every man for himself and don't let people see your weakness or they're going to take advantage of it. I'm glad that that's changing, but do you see that changing as well?
I hope so. I think I live in my bubble, and I have the people that I interact with, and I think people are open to talking about that. I definitely think that younger people, I see this in the college students, that they are much more open in talking about that. I think the baby boomers have generally been more open in talking about that than their parents' generation. So I think as our society ages and our generations move along, I think that, yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of people are experiencing some mental health crises after the pandemic. I think that what the pandemic did, particularly in the kind of that complete lockdown period that many people experienced, I think that they were surprised at the effects on their mental health. And I hope that they're taking that more seriously. You take that and this idea that we really do need to make an effort. Hopefully that will help propel us along. We all need somebody. And I was going back thinking about, your situation, Danielle, and, talking to your husband, you got to get out there. And you're absolutely right. Perceptions matter. Introverts probably need less social stimulation, or at the very least, maybe for shorter periods of time, less frequent than extroverts. In psychology, we actually we try to define introversion and extroversion as to where you get your energy. So you get your energy from being alone. Is that way how you can recharge, or do you actually recharge by going out and being around people? So we're all different there, but we all need somebody. And I think about both my grandparents, both my grandmas lived well into their late 90s. And one of my grandmothers, she had a friend, a lifelong friend named Hilya. And they both were very hard of hearing. The hearing aids weren't as good back then. And every day they would talk, and they actually couldn't hear each other. And I would ask my grandma, how's Hilya doing? And she rarely could give me any details because they were independently having different conversations, but Hilya was still providing a small amount of social support, but it was enough. And I think my grandma was doing the same for Hilya as well. So we all need somebody, even if we can't hear everything they're saying.
Excellent. Well, we have touched on many topics, a very holistic approach, as I would expect with you. And I'm not a lumper, Dr. Rob, but if there was, what do you want the takeaways to be for our listeners today?
Well, I think that's it. If you're not doing any of these things we mentioned, then try to add them to your life. And it's never too early to do that. And I also say it's never too late to do that. Make sure you're getting enough exercise. And if you haven't been doing strength training, add that into your routine. That's the biggest thing that probably explains the greatest amount of variance. We say it could have the greatest improvement in cognition. Stay engaged, have a purpose, continue to make friends, continue to reach out to people, avoid diabetes, and if you're having hearing problems, get them checked out. The new technology is amazing. You can listen to your phone. You can watch movies with your hearing aids through Bluetooth. But it also will allow you to be a better family member and friend.
Excellent message. And I know you have it in your book, Train Your Brain, How to Maximize Memory Ability in Older Adulthood. And then you actually give them practical, in your last book, the Cranium Crunches there, you actually give them practical tips, and you have a Smart Fit and Activity Connection book. But how can people learn more about what you're doing and stay tuned to Dr. Rob?
Yeah, well, if anybody has wanted to reach out and talk, I frequently will set up appointments and get to know people. I think just email me at robwinningham@gmail.com, ROBWINNINGHAM, robwinningham@gmail.com, and feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to connect.
And I know you will. I know of many people who've done just that and are happy that they did. Well, Rob, so good to see you. So good to hear from you. It's so good to see that you're just as passionate as ever about this topic and being helpful. But again, I'm particularly over the moon about your connection with the younger generations and your reports on their appetite for interaction with older adults and social connection. And do you feel that the younger generation is perhaps a whole lot more appreciative of the benefits of a holistic lifestyle than perhaps my generation was, the boomers, or yours?
Yeah, I hope so. I think many of them are rather sophisticated in thinking about these factors. I think that many of them are engaging in some very healthy behaviors, and I think we are probably going to see more holistic behavior. I think in society we have kind of come to accept the idea that we can't expect medication to fix us. And I know this is so much how is not how the three of us think, but others have thought that way in recent decades. And I don't think we'll see that out of the younger generations to the same degree.
Wow, what an optimistic show, wasn't it, Danielle? Really?
Absolutely. Such a great conversation. And we'll be sure to put links to your books in the description of this podcast as well, so people can check those out.
Thank you for your time, Rob, and keep doing what you're doing. And I hope to see you out there in the West sometime soon.
Oh, I hope so too. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to The Bright Side of Longevity with host and preventive medicine physician and award-winning author Dr. Roger Landry and co-host, nationally board-certified positive psychology and mindfulness coach Danielle Pailly. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.